Professor Robin Dunbar, welcome to the Interacting Mind Center.
Thank you.
So you have spent your academic life studying how humans coordinate in social interaction. Why is that an important topic to study?
At the end of the day, we live in very large social communities, and the world has become completely globalized in one sense. And so enabling people to work together and live together in these very large political and social units that we have, even just on the scale of the local town, is very challenging.
So while human social interaction seems important, it also seems like a lot of the way a lot of the stuff that actually happens in social interaction is of sort of relatively little importance. We talk about where we're going on vacation, we talk about the weather, we may talk about that one of our friends made a fool of himself and so on. So why, if social interaction is so important, why do we spend most of the time talking about non-important stuff?
In many ways, these aren't unimportant in that sense. I mean, they sound trivial, so the kinds of things we talk about, but actually a lot of it is just about getting to know people. And getting to know people requires you to spend time with them. And in some sense, the strength of your relationship with somebody depends on how much time you spend with them. So you have to be able to do stuff with them, whether it's doing physical stuff, playing football together, or whether it's chatting away or something. These are all kind of equally important in terms of oiling the wheels of relationships. So all this sort of trivial social conversation actually ends up being really quite important, because it's just allowing you to get to know somebody else and build a relationship with them.
So, and another striking feature of the human species is that we have so large brains. And it does really seem to be a costly thing to walk around with. It requires a lot of calories. It requires large skulls that create problems for mothers doing child delivery and so on. But so why do we need all this brain mass?
Essentially, it's because we live in such a complicated social world. Basically, you need a very big computer to kind of manipulate all information for the very large number of social relationships that you have. And so this stems off the back of the fact that we are a member of the primate family, and this kind of social complexity is characteristic of all the primates. And so in the primates, you have this general relationship between the size of the brain, in particular size of bits, important bits of the brain, but it affects the whole brain size of the whole, and how big and how complex their social system is. And we just do that on an even bigger scale. That's the key point. So we end up having to have these enormous computers stuck on the top of our bodies, which are, as you say, extremely expensive to develop and maintain through life, and cause us all sorts of problems, not least during childbirth.
So our social brains have a deep sort of evolutionary prehistory.
Very deep.
Yeah. Is there any way in which this sort of prehistory constrains the way that we interact even today in modern society?
Yes, in an important sense, because the world in which we evolved, if you like, and in which this machinery evolved, the brain and all the kind of other psychological mechanisms that are built around that, was actually very, very small scale. It's these sort of small scale, traditional hunter-gatherer type societies where community size is, somewhere between 100 and 200 individuals only. And although in the course of relatively recent history, the last 10,000 years maybe, we've managed to create bigger and bigger and bigger kinds of social groupings. First large villages, then small states, city-states, and then eventually, kingdoms and these kind of things, are psychological mechanisms for binding society together are designed to handle very, very small, dispersed communities. So on one hand, it's a miracle we've managed to produce these kind of very big political units, like even the EU. But you see the strains and the stresses in the EU. This is sort of a reflection of these sort of difficulties that we have. So, you know, given that we live in that world, it raises interesting questions how we actually manage to make that bridge, as it were, out of these very small-scale communities. And also, you know, what constraints does it actually impose? You know, how might we better manage it? Otherwise, the EU will surely fall apart.
So that also leads me to my final question, because I would like to ask you about your views about our current state of knowledge with regards to human social interaction. So what are the kinds of key questions that we need to answer right now in order to understand what is human social interaction and why do minds interact?
That's a difficult question to answer in a way, because we actually, I don't think we understand well enough what even the basic building blocks are like. That said, it seems to me that one of the key aspects of, if you like, the modern world is the fact that somehow we've managed to build these really quite large political units, even on the scale of just the local town, as it were. We've got a lot of people together. And really understanding how we cope with managing life with complete strangers without, you know, just robbing them all the time, really is quite, you know, from a kind of biological or psychological perspective, I think is actually quite challenging. But there is another aspect of this which I think is quite important, in that the big difference between traditional small-scale societies and modern kind of industrial societies is that in a small traditional society, everybody knows everybody else. Whereas what's happened with us, so your sort of social network includes exactly the same people as everybody else's social network. Whereas what's happened really probably only in the last half century, as a result of much greater economic and social mobility, is that we've moved much more, and therefore our networks become very fragmented and very dispersed, and they start not to overlap. So, okay, your family part of your network is very stable, but your friends part is broken up into small groups who were friends at different stages of your life as you moved from, you know, university in Aarhus, and then you got a job in Copenhagen, and then maybe you went to Paris for a bit, and you have these little pockets of friends who don't know each other, and so your network, your social network, is very kind of fragmented. You don't have this kind of cohesion to it, and this kind of both the policing function, because there are places to hide now, you can escape and behave badly. Yeah. But at the same time, you don't have the support of this very cohesive network. So actually, in many ways, we're worse off now. So trying to understand how this works and why this should come to be, I think, is probably the most important feature that we have to kind of solve in a way.
So trying to understand how the social brain deals with fragmented networks of strangers.
Yes, indeed.
Well, Robin Dunbar, thanks very much.
Pleasure.